Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, assuming that you're watching live, and they should show up here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. And I often say this is one of my favorite parts of this particular program. And I hope that you're having a wonderful week so far. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of global ritual. Um, as you may recall, on Monday, we talked about Earth Day, which is coming up on the 22nd of April, and the fact that I'll be doing a live public Earth Day ritual on Saturday here in Danville at Earth Spirit Emporium. If you're in the area, it probably will be broadcast. Hello to Antonio in the chat room. It's good to see you, Antonio. And from that, we went into talking about public ritual on Tuesday. And we had a very good discussion about public ritual. And people have asked me to continue that subject. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. And hello to Christine in the chat room. It's good to see you, Christine. Yesterday we had Chris Copeland on. We talked about some of the things we're doing at Corellian Publishing, and we did a couple of mini readings for people. Today we're talking again about global ritual. And we probably will refer back to some of the aspects of public ritual. Although I will say that global ritual isn't necessarily public ritual, although as a general rule, it is. Um, and in the sense I plan to talk about it, it is. And hello to Renee in the chat room. But there's nothing to say that you could not have a global private ritual, and um, all you need are people around the globe to do it. And generally speaking, however, what we mean by global ritual are public rituals with people around the world all taking part in the same ritual. And this has been going on for a number of years now. And it was preceded, of course, by international ritual. And that goes back a long way, um, well before our modern internet technology. People were doing international rituals through attunement, meaning they would each do their part in their place, linking together astrally. The Fellowship of Isis was known for this, particularly in terms of elevations. And it was not uncommon for an elevation ceremony to have one part taking place at Clonigal Castle in Ireland and another part taking place wherever the candidate happened to be, and sometimes other groups joining as well. And hello to Zane in the chat room. It's good to see you, Zane. And the idea of people linking together over great distances is very empowering to groups. And it's very empowering in its way to the community as well. And it can be done by individual groups or traditions. It can also be done as an open community thing. And why is it important? Well, there are a couple of reasons that it's important. And we were talking the other day about the difference between solitary ritual, group ritual, and public ritual. And one of the points I made was that group ritual tends to amplify the abilities of everyone involved in it. When people come together, they lift each other up in a kind of automatic way. Now, they can also sometimes dampen each other down, but in theory, we lift each other up. And this all depends on how much people understand what they're doing. Um, if people come together in the wrong state of heart, they can actually simply muddy up their energy. But if they come together um, with a clear focus and a clear heart, all of the energies rise. The more people taking part, the stronger the effect you're going to have. Um, when we talk about global ritual, that can become a very strong effect indeed. And global rituals, in the Karelian tradition, we do rather a number of them. Every month, we have our peace prayer ritual that happens on the 15th day of the month. And this takes place all over the planet. People coming together to pray for peace. And by joining their energies, they raise more energy to promote the powers of peace and love than any one of them could do independently. On the 11th of the month, we do a special ritual for the crystal web. And, the same thing is true. When many people come together, um, being distributed over many different geographic points, they raise more energy than any of them, or at least most of them, could do alone. And because of the geographic distribution, um, even before they send it out, it's already more widely distributed. And hello to Steve in the chat room. It's good to see you, Steve. Um, you can, of course, send energy to anywhere from any place. But when you're raising it in many different places at once, the effect is obviously stronger. Now, there are two different types of global ritual. Um, one is where everyone takes part at the same time. And that means that they will be at different times of day in different parts of the world, sometimes very substantially different. For example, our guest yesterday, Chris Copeland, was joining us from the Netherlands. And for us, it was 12 noon Central Time. For her, it was 7 p.m. in the Netherlands. Um, when people do international ritual all at the same time, it's at that same moment, but it's not the same clock time for each of them. It will be very different. And this is both good and bad. In one way, it focuses all that energy at exactly the same time, but it can be inconvenient for people to do. I spoke earlier about pre-internet rituals by attunement. They were done in this way, and still are today. When you do a ritual by attunement, where you have people in different areas who are attuning to one another astrally, they will generally do it at the same time. It doesn't have to be, but they generally will. Um, although this too can be done in other ways. And when you do this kind of ritual, globally speaking, or even just over any wide geographic area, everyone has to be very mindful of their time, because it can be very easy to confuse time zones when we're dealing with the whole world. And, with the Karelian tradition, we have people all over the world. Um, in the main tradition, not to mention the offshoots of the tradition, there are people everywhere. And there have been people in places like Antarctica where there are not necessarily people now because there's not a permanent residency there. But there have been times that there have been people joining even from that sort of region. And lining everyone up to the exact same moment is a bit of an operation. Um, the other kind of ritual done globally is called a rolling thunder ritual. And I believe it's Operon Zell who came up with that term. Um, a rolling thunder ritual operates differently, but still over a vast geographical area. A rolling thunder ritual has everyone doing the ritual at the same time in their time zone. So let's say that the ritual is timed for 4 p.m. Um, that would be true for me at 4 p.m. Central Time. It would be true for someone else at, say, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, even though there's an hour difference. And what this does is the ritual gradually unfolds around the planet, um, moving forward through the different time zones. And this is also a very effective international global ritual format. And um, the other interesting thing about the this kind of format for a global ritual is that you can follow it over a 24-hour period and have reports on it and talk about how it's doing. And why would you want to do a global ritual? I said one of the reasons is to raise a greater amount of energy and more effectively distribute it. But the other thing, of course, is it pulls people together in their common cause. It allows them to work together when they might not otherwise have a way of ever doing ritual together. Um, when when we do a global ritual, we have people in North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, the Philippines, parts of Asia, all working together on the same ritual. And think about what that actually means to people. Um, Add to it now the technology we have today, and we can actually see each other. If we're doing the exact same moment of time, we can do it through a format like this, where we can actually see each other doing the ritual, depending how many people are involved. Some of our Corellian illustrations have been done that way, with people uh, simultaneously live casting from around the planet. Um, the coming illustration is a little more locally focused, because it's been so long since we were able to do that, since before the pandemic. But that international character will still be there, and there will be international participation. But when you think about being able, well, if you look back at some of the rituals that I have um, broadcast over the last couple of years, you'll remember, for example, we did ritual at one point with the clan of Kepper Temple out of South Africa. Doing ritual um, with people in South Africa live, um, from the other side of the world, is a remarkable thing to be able to do, and everyone being able to see each other. It's one thing when you're attuning astrally, you kind of have to, um, you have to really have your energy into it. Of course, you should certainly always do that, but you won't see the other people in a physical sense. You may be able to see them spiritually, but you won't see them physically. When you have this kind of technology, you could almost be in the same room. And in coming years, this will be even more so as virtual reality becomes more of a thing. And I would say within another 5 years, when we do international ritual, we may be able to have the feeling that we're literally in the same room, by using a virtual platform to create that effect. And I think that is an amazing physicalization of the kind of thing we do in the astral. And I perceive it much in that way. Um, I think a lot of what we're doing with the internet has a spiritual level that we're mostly not giving it credit for, and that it's going to, in time, become a very important part of our metaphysics as we come to see this more and more clearly. Now, during my lifetime, I've seen a number of international things occur. And one of the first really successful ones that I recall was the Goddess 2000 project. And I want to take a moment and talk about that. It was not certainly a global ritual as such, although um, it had some of the same aspects. It was a global art project. And let me ask, do you remember the Goddess 2000 project? I will grant you it was 24 years ago. Um, it was put together by the beloved Abby Willowroot, who is now among the ancestors, an amazing artist and high priestess, who, among other things, was a Corellian high priestess, as well as having high priesthood in a number of other traditions. Um, she also had artwork in the Smithsonian Institution, which I believe is probably still there. Abby was a remarkable woman, and she came up with the idea that she could help the pagan community come closer together by giving them an activity that had nothing to do with politics or tradition or liturgy, but rather simply with the idea of love of the goddess and creativity. And the slogan of the Goddess 2000 project was a goddess on every block. And the idea was you make an artistic representation of the goddess, however you wish to do that, however you perceive her, however you um, wish to represent her. And that's your contribution to this project. And it was very much international. And at the end, there were many exhibitions of Goddess 2000 artwork. Um, all over the place, beautiful things, and I find it tragic that more people don't remember this. But then that problem of memory in our community is a big thing. We've talked about it before. I'm surprised how many people don't remember the Pentacle Quest, another very large campaign. But I would have to say that the Goddess 2000 project was the first really successful international pagan project that I recall really coming off well and accomplishing its purpose, which was to pull people together in a non-confrontational situation. Because so often, prior to that, when people came together, it became a matter of my tradition is better than your tradition. In the end, there can be only one type of attitude. By putting the emphasis on artwork, on creativity, and simply on goddess, that element was not present in the Goddess 2000 project, and many other things followed this lead and really helped to draw our community together in a way it had not been able to come together previously. Um, and I have always thought that was a huge contribution to our future. Now, when we talk about global ritual, of course, the Goddess 2000 project was not exactly a ritual, but it was a global activity. Global ritual serves some of these same purposes. As I said earlier, a global ritual can be the idea of a ritual within a particular tradition. In our Corellian tradition, we often do global rituals. We are certainly not the only tradition that does that, but there are also occasions when people come together regardless of their tradition to do global ritual. And this, like the Goddess 2000 project, gives us a way to all come together in a positive manner. And hello to the little pagan that could. I love that name. And the little pagan that could says, I've not heard of the rolling thunder idea before, but I actually love the idea of a ritual, sort of following the sun or moon around the globe, as each person does the ritual in their time zone. That's exactly what a rolling thunder ritual is. And both of these formats, the simultaneous ritual and the gradual rolling thunder ritual, are very good ways of doing global ritual um, or any geographically widespread ritual, even if it's perhaps not quite that widespread. But it helps people to have um, this way of coming together. And of course, much of this is through attunement. You're linking your energy astrally. Um, but again, today we also have all of this technological ability to put with it. Um, and it's wonderful to link our energy astrally. There's also something to be said for being able to see one another. And I was never very fond of the old chat room rituals where everything is typed out. Because I just really didn't feel the same personal connection. I do find that with video ritual. Although I do know that many other people felt that very much through chat room ritual, and it was very good for its time. And I took part in many of them. But I find that using video to connect people for worship and magic over wide areas is one, it's revolutionary, though we don't think of it that way. And it's a huge step forward, I think, in helping us to have a tight international global connection with other people. Now, people are always people. So, we can do everything we want to do to pull ourselves together. There's always going to be a tendency for people to pull apart as well. That's part of being human. But the more that we can pull together, the more that we can link our efforts, I think the better off we are. Now, the other thing about global ritual, which we talked about on the subject of public ritual, is that it is accessible in many cases, even beyond our community. And many of the global rituals that I have been involved with were wholly or partially broadcast and recorded. You can still see what happened. You can get a feel for them. You can, in some cases, take part in them because well, let me take a sip of coffee. Coffee keeps me going. There's one other aspect which I've spoken about a little bit in this half hour, but not only do you have the rolling thunder idea, but ritual can also be joined long after the main ritual has occurred, depending on the type of ritual and what it's meant to do. You can add your energy if an energy construct has been created to carry forth the purpose of that ritual decades after the ritual happened. And this is part of how many temples have been used. You continue to add energy to them. And with our current technology, the idea of an eternal ritual that is begun by people um, at one point in time, but continued long after those people have crossed into spirit and joined the ancestors, is very much a thing that can now be in a way that it could not really be in the past. The idea has always been something that can happen, and people have done such things, but not like we can do them now. And one of the things, having come so close to, I mean, I've come close to death a number of times in my life, but this last year was very close. And one of the things that I'm very aware of is that when I have joined the ancestors, I'll still be here talking to you if you're still listening, because my image and my recordings, and probably the AI version of me, will still be here. And there is also a theory, which I fully intend to find out about in the fullness of time, that we can also use as part of our reincarnational cycle. Um, these visual images we're creating, these computer images we're creating, as a vehicle for our soul. And if you're familiar with the use of statuary in traditional paganism, you know that it has been used this way to link to a particular spirit who is then believed to express itself through the statue. Particularly temple statues, certain ancestral statues have been used that way. This is a far more effective version of that same idea. So when we talk about global ritual, um, which is ritual taking place over a wide geographical dispersion, ritual can also take place over a wide chronological dispersion, much more than just over the course of 24 hours, over the course of endless years in circumstances where it's intended for that and designed for that. And I think that we will see more of that going forward, if only because I'm likely to do it myself. So these are some of the things for us to consider as spiritual people as we look at new technology and as we look at how we do ritual and what we do ritual for and the techniques of our ritual that while we've always had these possibilities in an astral form, we have them in a far more physical form now. And this is only going to increase as we go forward. And it is ridiculous for us not to be looking at how to adapt this. So, why do we want global ritual? Why would we want long-term chronological ritual? And one of the big reasons is to help to pull us together in a positive way, to help to raise more energy toward the things we're trying to do, and also to help to educate people about who we are and what we do. We were talking about this on Tuesday, but when people can actually see, it's harder for them to be ignorant. Still possible. I will admit to being amazed at the amount of ignorance that is possible that we've seen in recent years, but harder. And one of the things that is very beneficial is when people know someone from a particular minority community, in our case, minority religion. It's a lot harder uh, to then persecute that person when you see what they do. It's much harder to indulge in fantasies about what that is. And this is why this kind of ritual is very important. It, in addition to its metaphysical aspects, it also has that social aspect of helping people to get to know us. I often refer to Pete Pathfinder Davis, who is one of my mentors in life, the founder of the Aquarian Tabernacle Church. And at the time that I met Pete, it was basically I believe right about the same time that they began their Spring Mystery Festival in the mid '80s. And he was telling me it was not that long before that they had moved their headquarters to Index, Washington. And hello to Mary in the chat room. It's good to see you, Mary. And Christine says there's power in numbers. My goodness, that is so. And our community misses that um, realization quite often. There's more power in numbers than almost anything. And Mary says, I wish I could have met him. He sounds like a wonderful soul. He was. He absolutely was, and very wise. Partly because he had had a lot of real world experiences. But the story that he told me about how when they had moved to Index, Washington, was that the way that he introduced himself to the community was not to wait for them to come and meet him. He went out and introduced himself to all of his new neighbors. But he did not go and say, "Hi, I'm I'm Pete Pathfinder, the head of the Wiccan church that just moved in next door." No, he said, "Hi, I'm Pete Pathfinder," or actually, "I'm Pete Davis." And he got to know them as people first, and this helped tremendously as they learned more about him. And I've talked endlessly about how he joined the Washington State Interfaith Council, and that part of why he was so successful there and eventually became president of the council um, was that he made a point to speak their language. He used interfaith techniques, and getting along in the world is something that um, there is an art to. Getting along as a person in a position of respect within a minority religion requires a certain mindset and willingness to meet people where you find them. Because, as with Pete and the neighbors, they're not going to come introduce themselves to you. You must introduce yourself to them, and you must do it in the way that's going to be most effective, and you should think about that. But with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. Tomorrow will be our weekly roundup. I also want to take a moment to recommend to you my Patreon at revdonlewis.com. We do a number of interesting things at my Patreon, notably my Monday night chat room, and I hope that you'll consider perhaps supporting me through that if you like the things that I do. Also, if you are interested in getting a reading, you can find that at CorellianPublishing.com. Myself, also Reverend Mary Hawk, Reverend Brian Ellicott, all available through CorellianPublishing.com. And with that, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. And Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to always consider the impressions that we make and to do the best that we can in building the image that we hope for others to understand about us, presenting ourselves as we wish to be perceived, and help us to come together in positive ways and to do the next right thing constantly in our lives. There will always be successes and there will always be failures, but there is always also the next right thing. And help us always to find it. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks, and knowing you are always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always, and I'll see you tomorrow.